welcome to the Cellar. A couple of things right off the bat. Number one, there won't be a Curmudgeon next week because I'll be in Gamehole in Madison, and you should be too. And number two, let's see, what was number two going to be? Oh, there's a second one. I'll have to think about it. Oh, no. Anyway, there was a second thing. Gamehole Con. It'll come to me, no doubt. Now, this first one I actually pulled off of the Patreon page. I hadn't known it was there, but it's an excellent question and something I know a little bit about. The village of Hamlet features a small village which follows a Druidic faith and a recently constructed monastery devoted to a singular god. This strongly resembles something Irish villages would be faced during the 5th century as Christianity spread through the island. Do you know of Gygax? Intentionally modeled Hamlet after this area, and if so, would it be safe to say that early D&D was assumed to take place in the real, albeit fantastical, Earth? Well, OERTH. Hey, there's a big mystery. Spell it a different way, say it the same. That's a little snarky. Yeah, Gary was very Eurocentric in the very beginning because that was his tradition. That's what he knew. That's what he had read up on. That's what he was familiar with. When we create something, we draw upon either something totally new from inside of us or an amalgam of all the things that have influenced us, filtered through our creative instinct and talent. So yes, it's absolutely that example. Hamlet, sure. Conflicting faiths, the old faith, the Druid of the Grove held more sway because he'd been there longer, and for whatever reasons you want to write into your world. But the original D&D was extremely Eurocentric because look who you had. The Bronstein game, which was very medieval European fiefs and domains and stuff. You had Dave's original Blackmore, very European. You had Gary's Greyhawk, very European. Yes, it was. Everything springs from something. All right? People today want to go, oh, you were racist and you were bigoted and you're biased. No. You use the clay you have to create with. It's only later that you get paints and glazes and you can make it a better thing. It was the easiest thing. Dunsany, many of the authors, more about the authors later in another question. But absolutely, it was. Gary's ideal for the Druids was the circles of learning, and it took a long time to become even a low-level Druid because there were other ranks to go through, and those are reflected in the names of the levels, and they're kind of bastardized from what it used to be to become a Druid. Druids had to have, for instance, and again, we only know what other people said about them, but they were reputed to have fantastical memories, incredibly detailed memories, because they had to be able to recite their lineage all the way back to whenever. Okay, next question. Other than monk and possibly assassin for players, how do you feel about the classes that got added to the game later? I like the ranger. He was the ranger, and I'll use my old-fashioned pronouns. The ranger was always going to be something after either Robin Hood or Strider. Those were the tropes that we had to draw upon. What else? A thief. That was a later ad. I like the illusionist. I'm okay, because here I've always been a fan of the paladin, but sometimes they make the fighter feel left out in the cold. Well, yeah. I personally, the last time I ran a campaign, when I was testing stuff a few years back, I had a pal in the group, and he was a pain in my ass. Number one, he was a poor player. I think he was a 3 or 3.5 or something. And it was like he had a stick up his butt. And that is the extreme of paladins. It wasn't just necessarily goody two-shoes. He just had a stick up his butt about everything. I have been known to use paladins in a pre-gen mix when I think that they're liable to get a little crazy otherwise, and he's that kind of there as a morality cop. And I generally make him potent enough that he can whack them with the flat of his sword and ring their bell a little bit. Not kill them, but certainly catch their attention. I don't know how many kinds of cavaliers you need. I've talked about this before. There must be 40, at least, last time I saw at least 40 extraneous player types. Because they're all variations on the basics. They're all variations. Why a cavalier of Roland should get an advantage over a cavalier of Ludwig. They're cavaliers. They're mounted fighting men. They're sort of knights. The risk of going out on a limb here, I feel that campaigns and people that worry about this type of distinction might be better LARPing or a Society of Creative Anachronism or whatever, because these are imaginary people we're making up in our head to play with a pencil and paper game. A lot of the what I call the bullshit player types are a result of the fascination with backstories. Write up a good enough backstory and bingo, you got a new character type. In other cases, especially the later editions, it's power-hungry ramping up of artificially high classes. I mean, some of these classes start out so innately skilled that they could kick the ass of a couple of first and second level first edition players at first level. I mean, come on. In my opinion, most of the character classes are extraneous, frivolous, and foolish. If your type of PC in your campaign wants to adhere to the principles of Olaf, it's fine. But they didn't need to print too much confusion. That's my opinion. Okay, when you were editing The Dragon, what was your process criteria for accepting new monster descriptions? How much does the game owe to those articles? Are there any stinkers you passed on that stick in your mind and are worth a giggle? Well, creature features, number one, was a take on late night movies on UHF TV stations. It was also feeding the enormous maw of It's kind of like feeding Moloch or Baal its hungry mouth of the desire for new monsters, different monsters, which I've never quite fully understood. And because, let me pick 20 basic monsters, and I'm not talking about a boulet and a beholder. I'm not talking about handpicking 20 of the bad guys. But okay, people want more because they get tired of killing the same old. So we decided that, okay, let's feed that monster, and at least it would go through the filter of me, the editor, and not bend the existing rules or torque out the existing framework of the game. Now, we all know about the first one, the boulet. Written in desperation. The second one, which was supposed to be the first one, I think was... Let's see, I think the next two were the Remorhas and the Katoblipas. And I chose them both because they were weird. Kind of one-offs. Almost weird enough to be the bad guy in a mini campaign or a minor campaign or whatever. To be honest, I don't remember a lot of them after the first few. I don't even remember how long that continued, or whether it continued after I left. It may have been something I delegated to somebody else, and they just brought me in a handful that they'd weeded them down to, and we decided that way. So I don't know how many. To be honest, I don't know how much the game owes to it. I don't know how many of them that got printed in Dragon got picked up in the later editions. Never cared to check. Any stinkers you passed on that stick out in your mind? Well, when it comes to stinkers, I do not think that you could possibly surpass the silliness that came out of England when they came out with their version of the Monster Manual. I'm willing to cede that it might be a fundamental difference between English and American folklore and the fairy tales told to us and whatever. But the flump, a big marshmallow thing floating around, for some reason that has just always annoyed the hell out of me. I know it's a game about fantasy, but it was still just too silly. A whole lot. Oh, what was the name of that book? I had it on the tip of my tongue earlier tonight before I watched some TV. Anyway, it was the English version of the Monster Manual. And White Dwarf people got to publish it because we made them a deal early on. They were going to be the exclusive over there, and they got to make a book of their own, and we would sell it for them here, and they would sell it over there. And that's how it came about. Again, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a sociologist. I don't pretend to understand English folklore and custom well enough to understand why so many of those, to my mind and to many other people at the time, were considered silly. If they were Monty Python silly, that'd be more fun. Maybe they were trying to be Monty Python silly and failed. I don't know. Fighting dragons is exceedingly bad judgment. That's in a quote. You just don't get wisdom like that from modern gamers. No, that's because they haven't been fried by a dragon often enough, or even once. They think they're dragon-born. Breathe on me. Well, okay. There's always going to be a bigger dragon. Dragons are just, they should be such an awe-inspiring, awful thing that there should never be more than one alive in the world if you're going to have them on the scale of Game of Thrones. And yeah, other people have talked about, the dragons out of this can kick, because there's a thing going on Facebook about they're underpowered. I agree, they were, but I explained on there what Gary's rationale was at the time. And so I don't know if that calmed anybody's down from the dithers that they were having. Greetings from Finland. So far I've been creating a few role-playing game ideas, but I lack the experience and knowledge of creating such games. Do you have any advice for creating games? Yes. I won't say it's easy, but my advice is easy. Gather some of your friends together, sit them all down around the table, say, okay, we're going to play a new game, and walk them through it. Now, I don't mean walk them through the mechanics necessarily, but walk them through the game. Give them all a real low-level, relatively puny character to play. Keep the monsters correspondingly puny. And if you got new ideas and new mechanics and whatever, there's the way to work them out. Do what Dave Arneson did. Do what Gary Gygax did. Get a bunch of people around the table and buff and polish and revise and edit until you feel you've got it just the best you can be. And the playtesters that you've drawn in at the end, not the ones that have been there all the way who are already biased one way or another, the last batch goes, wow, great game, you did it. There's really no other concrete advice I can give you. Now, you can take all the things you like out of the games you play now, the systems, the mechanisms, and then change all the ones that you don't like, because obviously there's some you think, and I don't mean anything by this, there's some you think you can do better. And that's great because that's what spurs development in new games. And test them. It's the best advice, the most solid advice, and the most useful advice. Because if you use that advice, the feedback you get will tell you so many things. First and foremost, whether the game you think is great, you sold well enough on them to think it was great. Okay, here we go back. Bilbo may not have had any thief skills. In fact, he got caught in his very first attempt at picking a pocket. But he did do one thing that early PC thieves did. He stole from his party. Yes, he did. And it was a plot device. Every other sword and sorcery tale that you read that was written back then, when somebody stole from their party and it was determined to have done it, the retribution was often harsh and final. Falling out amongst thieves. But yeah, okay, he did it. It's a plot device. How did he get the ring? It's okay. See, that's the trouble with using the Hobbit as a canon law for anything. It's one book. One book. D&D is not just Middle Earth. It's every other world that contributed to its creation. Yes, it was a plot development. Of course it was. It was necessary. So no, it does not make it right in a campaign. Stealing from your party is heinous. If I was running a game and somebody said, I'm going to steal so-and-so, I'd say, all right, go ahead. And if they were successful, I'd make sure that eventually they found out that they'd been stolen from. And I'd let the party deal with them. Exile and outcast, stripped nearly naked with no weapons, is the least I would recommend for violating the trust of an adventuring group. That's like somebody in Lewis and Clark's expedition stealing food and selling it. Not done. One for all and all for one. And if it isn't a big sense of bonhomie and camaraderie, then I think you're playing the game wrong. Or you've got the wrong people playing it. And there goes Conan's wall climbing ability is really due to his background as a hillman. Tower of the Elephant. Yeah, okay. All right. He's Conan. He's one goddamn person. He's extraordinary. Not every person in your campaign is going to start out as Conan. Not every character is going to end up as Conan. If you're playing right to where you think you would earn being Conan at some point, then a whole lot of them are going to die along the way. Using one example, because he's well known. Now, if you wanted to tell me you wanted to use the rock climbing thing and give a little backstory that he used to climb the rocks to steal the eagle's eggs or whatever, okay. Then he knows about finger holds and that kind of stuff. Okay. Not just, Conan could do it. No, sorry. I'm really getting tired of that mindset. It's up to the DM whether or not he allows it or she allows it. Now, here's the really insulting part of this person. Hillman, Elephant, God in the Bull, along with Jack of Shadows are probably the best, are the inspirations for that, with perhaps a little of Gollum's preternatural ability thrown in. Inspirations are sprinkled all over the place. The more you've read, the more you'll see. If I were... This is poorly worded because I'm going to take it as a great insult that you're going to lecture me in a more I've read. Gary and I combined Appendix N. Read every one of those books, most of them before I met Gary. And Gary read most of them before he met me. And then we shared all the ones that the other one hadn't read. And that's how they ended up on the list. Tell me what I've read. The fact that only 3 books in all the stuff I've read give those kind of superpowers should make them extremely unordinary people, extraordinary people of the NPC type. Oh, here's a brilliant statement. A locked treasure chest never seemed like much of an obstacle to me, unless in some contrived scenario where the party knows that whatever is inside is extremely fragile. Seems like the best solution to a locked treasure chest is a fighter with a hammer. And then there's some other quip that was posted in reply. There's a Russian saying that translates to roughly, there is no lock that is a match for a crowbar, or something to that effect. Okay, well, we know the second one is wrong. We know that. There are many substances that cannot be broken apart with a manual crowbar. Now, locked treasure chest smash. Brilliant. So the jewelry that was in there, in the settings they were in and everything that was worth 7,000 pieces of gold, you just smashed into gems and hack silver that's now worth 21. Brilliant. So, the locked chest that had the fragile scrolls, papyrus scrolls with wonderful spells written on them, are now pieces and scraps and crumble. Well, let's not even go with the potions and the salves and kind of stuff that could be in there. And that's not it's not contrived. People lock stuff up that they feel has value to them. If you're planning a campaign where a bunch of healing potions is more likely to be found sitting out on the shelf somewhere than it is locked away somewhere because of their intrinsic value, then you're playing in what I call a Monty Hall campaign. Let's make a deal, let's just give shit away. No, don't play that kind of stuff. It's not contrived to make you want to think about that. A couple of Gary Cons ago, when it was during the pandemic and they were virtual, I had two boys from Northern Ireland playing, younger men, boys. And the first day, everything they wanted, everything that they faced, they were going to burn it. Lockbox, burn it. Barrel full of something, can't get it open, burn it, burn it, burn it. And I pointed out to them that burning that box, it might hold 4 5th level magic user spells on crumbling parchment, probably wouldn't fare well. Well, the next day, because they played in the game, one of my games the next day, they brought hammers and chisels. I excused them. They were 10 and 11. By the time we got done with the second game, they had learned a little bit more about finesse and the advantages of finesse. Yeah. Hulk see, Hulk smash. That'll do you real good in a lot of the campaigns I ever ran, or any of mine. Here we go with another question. Did Gary Gygax ever read Poul Anderson's Broken Sword, and what did he think of it? Well, someone else went on to answer, it's in Appendix N. Also, 3 Hearts, 3 Lions, and the High Crusade is also recommended under Poul Anderson. Yes, the love of Poul Anderson is one of the very first things that Gary and I focused on. We each had really enjoyed this interesting, who was not a huge name at the time. Yes, we wrote it. We read it, rather. Do you have any advice for running the Village of Hamlet AD&D 1E at a convention with 3.5 hour time slot? No. No, I don't. You can contrive something. There's that word again. There's nothing. It's not a dirty word. You could contrive something. Drew, the Druid of the Grove, could give you a task. Then you could go do, because he's got something you want, and if you go do this for him, he'll give you that. You could put something together like that. But there's nothing that'll just lift out of the Village of Hamlet and only last 3.5 hours without an enormous amount of setup. It's like, walking into a 3-hour movie 48 minutes after it started. It's real hard to pick up the movie from there, and you only get, no. I really recommend you do simpler stuff, one-offs, for conventions. And if you do an interesting enough one-off, you'll be a hit. Do a one-off. Something that's designed to be run in 3.5 hours. Something commensurate. I run the Wheel of Blame I'm going to run it 5 times at Game Hall, and I run them in 4-hour slots and seldom use more than 3.5. My format's a little different than standard, but still I've got 6 or 7 players, and we generally, we finish it. Pardon me, getting a little dry. Okay, here's another reason why Bilbo was picked. He was a hobbit, and Smaug never smelled a hobbit. Okay. Next one. So I guess it's fair to say I can't play a dragonborn monk of Tiamat in one of your games. Oh, you can play it. If I lose my mind to the point where I hand out a pre-gen, because if I did do that momentarily or it got slipped in there, as soon as I came to and realized it, the dragonborn monk would die horribly. Horribly. 14 lightning bolts all at once. Light you up like the Strip in Vegas. Make all those saving throws, why don't you? All right. Now we're going to talk about something interesting. Anything is possible in old school. So I say anything is possible in old school. Yes. What bounds do you put on it? Common sense. Common sense. I don't care what you rolled. If you jumped off the face of the Hoover Dam or a similar very high, very hard surface, it's exceedingly unlikely, and I don't just mean 5%, exceedingly unlikely that you're going to live. You're dead. Stupid. Now, if you were going to tumble 135 feet down the side of a mountain, bang, 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 bang. Now we get into the anything's possible. And then it's all up to the DM and the die rolls, what he requires. And the DM has every right to be every bit as arbitrary as they want. And we were. But when you give them, and they do it, you got to let them have it. And means you got to change your mindset a little bit and accommodate it. And not let them run crazy with something. I've mentioned this before. I knew a guy, a magic user, that had 5 or 6 variations on a fireball spell. From lighting a candle, much like the beginning of the Potter movies, so it wasn't in something that looked like a lighter, to an actual fireball. And they were all tempered to do specific things or specific damage or whatever. Spent a lot of money, a lot of resources, researched them all. Why not? Anything's possible. Now, it is fantasy, but are you going to be a slave to that concept and allow him the Philosopher's Stone, which turns base metal into gold? No, it'd ruin your campaign. Are you going to give him a dragon horde as large as the one in the movies? No. You destroy the economy of the entire world. No. Of course not. But if the guy wants to... All right, case in point, a couple of years ago, one of the very first wheel games I was running, they were just absolutely stymied. They could not find the passageway through the wall of thorns. And they'd been watching these giant butterflies fly over the wall, and they couldn't climb the wall because they're all dripping all kinds of juices and saps and stuff, most of which would, make you feel really, really regretful of having tried. But they noticed these giant butterflies. I mean, these are giant butterflies flying back and forth over the wall, getting nectar out of these enormous trumpet-shaped flowers. So, all right, I'm going to strip naked. You guys are going to pick up some of those flowers and pour the nectar all over me. And I'll wait here and lay here until the butterflies come down, 4 or 5 of them attach themselves and fly me over the wall. You okay? So, just for the hell of it, roll me a 20. Roll me, meaning roll a 20-sider. And he did. And it was right there in front of the table and everybody. It was a nat 20. And the idea was so brilliant and so funny and so absurd, and he rolled it, so it worked. That's really what I mean when I say anything was possible in old school. Anything. As long as it didn't go beyond common sense. The swallow factor. Is it so ludicrous you just can't swallow it? Well, then don't. But anything else in between, heck yeah. So a few Gary Cons ago, a noted game writer was playing in one of my games. And in the game, I had these supersized polar bears. As if a real polar bear wasn't bad enough. These were even like 3-4 feet taller when they stood up. And so I'd written up some mechanics for what would happen if the bear got you in a hug. Not just, as a claw hug, but how a hug would actually work. And how you could, in any way. So it came to pass that the bears were guarding so zealously they couldn't figure a way to get past him. So a dwarf, my friend, the writer, who was playing a dwarf, had a potion of giant strength. He didn't know what kind of giant. And he said, I'm going to drink the potion. And it ended up being hill giant strength. So he's a dwarf, 3.5 feet tall, and here's these 14 and 15-foot polar bears. So he goes up, grabs one in a hug, and kills it, because he rolled dice. I took the bear thing and I just kind of reversed it to having a player character hug it. Ludicrous? Yeah. Fantastical? Yes. And okay, he made. I think he had to roll because he broke the backs of 2 of them. I think he had to roll 3 6s on different rolls, and he rolled it, every time right on the table in front of everybody. Absolutely did it. And they were, good rolls, lots of bounces, long roll, whatever. And when the dice say he did it, you gotta let it happen. Got to. After all, it's fantasy. Is it possible to seduce or charm an inanimate object, for example? No. Now, somebody gives an example here about enchanting a candlestick and it really got the hots for you, but that's it, okay? It can't tell you that. I won't say that I can't envision a circumstance where you might want to try to do that. But a 20-foot tall statue of some mythical dwarven god cannot be seduced or charmed to follow you and do your bidding. It's a statue. Maybe it's going to hop on its base. Again, there's got to be some common sense in this. There has to be. If you don't have any common sense at all, you have nothing to anchor the rest of the fantasy on. My opinion. Is a successful improbable task, Nat 20 required, similar to wishes to a djinn, where the djinn tries to screw the wisher over? That is, your wish will all be better, and gold, for all the gold in the world comes true, but you're crushed beneath it and die. Or is it better to be diplomatic? Well, I'm not even sure where we're going with this one. I'll state it here. I'll never give a wish again. They should be so rare. So very, 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 very rare. Because of what power they can have. Not a fan of wishes. Even if it is fantasy. Personally, I'm not a fan of wishes. Let's see else. What do we got here? Thanks for sharing your recent travel tales. Really heartwarming to hear about your old teacher. Yeah, he's a great guy. And what a maverick they were in extending the curriculum as you described. Yeah, that was a fantastic class. Fantastic class. Plus, if you know the man, you can know how he'd walk into the Board of Regents and say, all right, I want to teach this class, and this is what I'm going to start with, and then they're all going, yay, okay. Because I remember it was in the 70s, and even little junior colleges were looking for ways to break the mold. But he was a great mold breaker. I'm delighted to have known him. Yeah, and then having him do my first 2 covers. Oh, Mrs. Curmudgeon had a great time on her side. Oh, yeah, man, she talks about Colin. Yeah, she had a great time in Colorado with her two lady friends. And I've encouraged her to go back and do it again for a week next summer if she wants to, just because she had such a great time. And the 3 of them were buddies or whatever, gal pal. I don't know the correct term. They were very, very, very close all through high school. Cat attacks noted and enjoyed. Yes, well. Yes, those darling kitties. They are turning out to be really, really mellow cats. And then cat question, you're sure green screen will be safe from marauding fur babies? Yeah, I've got an idea on how to do this. And Jim and I have been talking about it. I'm going to get I've got to pin down the longest dimension of the green screen. I'm going to get a PVC pipe of sufficient thickness and heft so that it won't sag in the metal. Now, rather than trying to put it on a tripod or a support base like that, I'm in my basement. I've got a suspended acoustic ceiling. I know, old-fashioned. So what? It works. And I've got all the joists running around. So I will just find the 2 joists that I need them to be on so that I can have that rolled up on that PVC pipe when I'm not using it, suspended from the ceiling where even the kitties can't get at it. And then just able to take the clips off and do the thing. So that's my plan. And oh, believe me, yes, I have thought about the cats. Much as I love them. All right. There's going to be a link at the end. YouTube link. Gentleman sent me a really interesting animation that he did. Really interesting. Now, it's preachifying time. And I'm going to chastise myself a little because that's how they came about. I was, and this is addressed to all the gamers, particularly the historical gamers, and also minis, and lastly, RPGs. By nature, RPGs are violent. I mentioned a few weeks ago about the ethics program that the city and the county are working on with youth, and my immediate response being, well, there goes murder hobos, because they're teaching ethics through role playing in D&D. And so, when you get right down to it, the outside world sees us running around killing shit or being killed. Now, we're having fun doing it, but if you aren't of us, it's hard to understand us. But sometimes us get a little callous. I happen to be reading an article about the Battle of Bennington in Vermont during the Revolution earlier today, and that's what prompted this preachiness. And it was Burgoyne getting his ass kicked repeatedly and ending up surrendering. And there was a side raid, recon and force to try and get supplies that was just nearly obliterated. And they were toting up the casualties. And I'm going to have to put my specs on to read this. Sometimes I can't read it even when I do have my specs on. The British had 200 killed and 700 captured, and the Americans had 30 killed and 40 wounded. And I thought, wow, that's good. Only 30 killed. But then you think about that was 30 dads, 30 brothers, and then you realize, yeah, it's all relative. This came to me first time a long time ago. Before I went overseas to Vietnam, I had occasion to play an old Avalon Hill board game called 1914 many times, according to the developer of the game, more times than he had. But, when you're in the Navy, broke and bored in the barracks on the weekend, you got time to play a game that takes 40 hours of play. And that's what we did. Started on Friday night and on Monday morning, for muster. And it was during that game that I first turned against supporting the war. When I'd gone in at the age of 18 in 1967, I went in for what I believed were the right reasons, defend the Constitution, support my country, etc., and stop the spread of godless communism. But then I realized that in the course of this game, and it was a step reduction game, I'd start with a core, take some losses, boom, I'm down a division, 16,000 men. Boom, take another hit, I'm down a division, 16,000 more. And I got a bunch of corps spread out along the front. And I realized that it must be a great struggle for real life leaders, especially generals and admirals, to be able to say it's going to cost a corps if we're to hold that or do that, or it's going to cost this many ships or this many aircraft to be successful. So we shouldn't forget that either sometimes. We're having fun slaughtering. Well, as long as they're not human, it doesn't make any difference. If you're slaughtering orcs, it doesn't matter. But when you're out playing other games, keep that in mind. It's not all grins and giggles. In some cases, it represents real people that had, real dreams, families at home, whatever. So it's easy to become kind of blasé as a wargamer about that. As we see what's going on in Ukraine and the increasing attacks by the Russians on the civilians because they're getting their asses kicked with their crappy inferior army by the Ukrainians. Remember, even the Russian soldiers have families. I've seen war. Don't ever want to see it again. So don't let yourself become calloused and numb. Don't ever. Don't let your kids point out to them at every chance you get that those headlines have real people attached to them. And that's my pacifist lesson. Those of you on the Patreon who have not let me know what your preferred time is for the monthly Q&A, please do so. There will be no Curmudgeon next week because of Game Hole. There will be a Curmudgeon the following week, which means I'll be, 14, 15. Yeah, it means I'll be I'll be recording it on the 27th for release on the 29th, Saturday. And until that time, Dodada Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.